Doing Good with Josh Dickson, the National Faith Director. Josh, I feel like I always get your title wrong, and I even look it up on the bottom of your emails. And right now,
it's all good.
I'm wondering if I haven't typed it right. Your former title for the campaign was what? National Faith Director for the Biden campaign?
Yeah. I think even more so, I was a co-conspirator with Doug Pagitt, most importantly. So,
well, it was, I'll tell you, friend, it was good conspiring with you and with the campaign. We had talked for a long time, you and I. It's a little background for people. Vote Common Good is an organization that wants to help faith voters, especially white evangelicals and white Catholic voters, know that they're not only rooted to the Republican Party for their voting options, which shouldn't be an argument you have to make. I've long been saying, as proud as I am to work with Vote Common Good and all that we've done, we shouldn't have to exist, right? We shouldn't have to travel the country and spend time and energy reminding faith voters that people of the Christian tradition can vote for Democrats. But man, millions of people have only heard their whole life that they can't. And Josh, you're someone who really helped me understand that and the importance of that work. So thanks for all your guidance in Vote Common Good's existence. And people may not know you yet if they've been in the Vote Common Good world, because in a lot of ways, even though you were the national faith coordinator for the Biden campaign, you were behind the scenes a lot, and you really did spectacular work. So thanks for all you did.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I think that what we saw in this election in terms of people coming together, we were doing stuff on the campaign, but Vote Common Good and so many other really important partner organizations that were the result of, years, if not decades, of folks really putting in the work and getting to understand people and building community connections. Were very, very much what we saw, all coming together in this election. And so just tremendous gratitude on my end for the partnership of Vote Common Good and of so many other partner orgs. I think that one of the cool things about this election is we saw not only pretty expansive outreach on the campaign side, but also on the on behalf of so many outside groups like Vote Common Good, like Faith 2020, like Not Our Faith, and a tremendous number of others, who came together and who said, "Hey, I'm putting principle over partisanship in this election, and we just can't have what we see from the current administration." There's just such a strong values contrast between what, for me, my evangelical Christian values are and what we saw and continue to see from the Trump administration. And I think that for a lot of folks, this election was really a time for choosing. And it was something that just presented such a strong contrast, even outside of these kind of partisan lines that were so socialized around, depending on where we grow up and the type of community that we're in. And, for me, I grew up in a very conservative evangelical community, so I went through this whole process myself and, it didn't really start interrogating and reconsidering my own politics till I was in my 20s. So I totally get it, and I know for so many folks, like that's,
and you're a Wheaton College graduate. Is that right? Do I remember that?
So I did not attend Wheaton, though I attended the University of Michigan for my undergraduate, and but I was very involved with Campus Crusade for Christ when I was there, and was a student leader in Cru, did multiple mission trips with Cru, spent 2 summers with Cru, and that very much shaped my own journey in a lot of ways. I ended up leading faith-based college recruitment for Teach for America at a number of different CCCU schools, including Council Christian College University schools, including Wheaton College, as well as Calvin, as well as Cedarville, as well as Azusa Pacific and Biola, and a whole host of others.
So when you were in that world, what was politics your thing? Were you thinking a lot about politics, or was there, because the reason I ask is that in so much of that evangelical world, which I'm quite familiar as well and worked in and consider myself a product of the high school ministry of that Campus Crusade for Christ is how I got involved in it. But there was kind of this thing that was almost as if like your faith is of calls you to a bigger association, to a bigger community than your politics, right? So you can kind of
For
leave
sure. Yeah.
American politics behind, and you're not to be involved in politics. And there was something good about that, right? Which told you that, you should see human beings as part of the family of God and not just the family of a state or a country or
Yeah.
a region or something. But
Yeah.
the shadowy side of it was they were actually working on behalf of a lot of religious right efforts that were really deeply, deeply partisan and political. But there was
Yeah.
something really kind of beneficial about that. Did you have a sense of political engagement when you were a college age person?
It's a great question. I identified as conservative, and I was a registered Republican, and cast my first vote in college for George W. Bush. But when it came to my own kind of involvement and sort of the way that I saw the things that I wanted to be a part of, in terms of where my impact could be greatest on campus, it was as far away from politics as possible at the
Right.
time. And I think it,
Right.
to your point, is very much of a mentality around, we're here to focus on ministry. We're here to focus on telling people about Jesus. We're here to focus on connecting with people. And I think that there's a lot of value in these things. I also think that there's a lot missing if you take out the impact of politics on people,
Mm.
and because it's real, and it's the impact of politics is oftentimes most felt by the most marginalized.
Mm.
And I think when my first job out of college was as a teacher on the south side of Chicago in a low income school. All my students were free and reduced price lunch. About a third of my students identify as Latinx. Sorry, 2/3 identify as Latinx. A third identified as African American. And I saw all the ways in which politics impacted my students and their families, and who got elected, and the
Mm.
systems that were created over time were, in many ways, institutionally disadvantaged the students and families that I was teaching around, and who had just had all the same potential as any other people,
Mm.
but way fewer opportunities, just because their zip code, was one digit different than if they were born 3 miles down the road in
Wow.
Chicago. And anyone
Yeah.
who knows Chicago knows that can make
Right.
a really, really big difference. Their odds of going graduating from college by the time they're 25 would have jumped from 6.5% to 90%.
Mm.
So for me, it was like seeing that firsthand and experiencing that with people who I deeply cared about. And who, I just knew deserved so much better, especially in the most resourced nation in the world. And seeing the ways in which folks were systematically disadvantaged. I think it really brought me back to that idea of Imago Dei, that idea that everyone's created in the image of God, and we should be fighting to ensure that that our laws and our systems allow them to have the chance to reach their fullest God-given potential. And our politics really do impact that, and whether you are working on this from the electoral landscape, big impacts in who we elect, whether you're working on this in the advocacy landscape, from the policy and programming landscape, all these things really matter. They matter to a lot of people. And so, when I was a classroom teacher and really interrogating my own faith and looking at the ministry of Jesus and looking like, what did Jesus do in his ministry? He spent time with the most marginalized communities all the time. Like many of his parables were about
Right.
spending time with marginalized people and folks who were considered outcasts, and really kind of turning the tables on the way in which people thought about their, people who they had maybe considered the other in the past, or people who they just hadn't had a chance to get to know. And I think that's one of the beauties of the ministry of Jesus, is it really centers us back in that core humanity of everyone, and that inherent dignity that we all have. And that was around the time when I think for me, I just felt a deep calling to do work, that was focused on using all the opportunities I've been given to break down these barriers of opportunity for folks, who again have so much potential, but just because of where they're born, the color of their skin, we're not given the same opportunities that they should have.
And then you end up as, you worked a bit inside the Obama campaign and that world. And then, in 2020, when Joe Biden becomes the candidate for the Democratic Party, you're asked to give leadership to the broad faith community that would be enlisted to consider supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and to stop Donald Trump. So I was involved in this campaign, because we wanted to stop the reelection of Donald Trump, no matter who it was, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was we were in that any functional adult category of the people we supported.
Yeah.
And we really needed to see an end to Donald Trump, but also knew that it was going to be crucial that we had the right kind of person, because the problems in the United States that you've articulated here now, they're persistent, they're perennial. They just come back over and over and over, no matter which administration seems to be planted in the White House. These issues come up, so people have to work to solve all of this. And I was really, really excited that it was Joe Biden. Like, I know a lot of people weren't as thrilled about Joe Biden because they had, maybe even like Joe Biden. I don't know if you've ever talked to the vice president, but there were times where I even picked up sort of from him where he's like, look, I shouldn't have to be running for president again, but I'm running because I think Donald Trump is such a hazard to the well-being of this planet that I have to do something about it. And I'm going to come out of what was my perceived, end of my career to have to run again. Because the country was being fractured in a particular way. So that's what I was excited about. Is I thought that Joe Biden provided the opportunity to really move this country. And I thought he was the most electable candidate in light of the conditions that were on the ground. And was excited about that. So how do you end up inside the Biden campaign? Are you comfortable talking about that piece of the story? Because I think for people who are interested in this, they'd love to know that. And then a little bit about the wide range of people that are in the faith community. We at Vote Common Good, we had a very specific target and sliver of the work that we're doing to try to move white evangelicals who tend to only go Republican. But like the United States of America, the coalition of faith communities that you were able to put together was, I think it's historic, right? I don't think any campaign that I've ever seen had quite the engagement and breadth of people that were that you had put together, and people that offered themselves to the service of the campaign. So can you say a little bit about how you got into the Biden campaign, with this background of yours, and then and who was all involved, so that people really do understand the scope and the scale of the level of faith commitment to the Biden election?
Yeah, totally. So I have to go back a little ways to kind of trace the story. But when I was, so after I was a teacher for 2 years in the South Side of Chicago, I went and worked as a recruiter for Teach for America at a whole host, as I mentioned before, of different faith-based colleges and universities around the country. And this is around between 2008 and 2010. And I was having thousands of conversations with young leaders of faith, and really just getting to know, like, what are the kind of major priorities and the things that like millennial Christians care about. And I was seeing that folks were looking for opportunities to do service-focused work. They were looking for ways to put hands and feet to their faith.
Because you're standing at like a job fair or something at these colleges and saying, like, hey, you should work for Teach for America, and people are saying, well, I'm also looking at this, or is that what's going on? Like, you're picking up the vibe of current college students?
Yeah, a lot of it was one-on-one conversations, and our approach was like very similar to community organizing. Lots of one-to-ones with student leaders, and really asking them what matters to you. What are the things that what do you want your legacy to be? What impact do you want to have? Given that you've had the opportunity to go to college and get a 4-year degree, which very few people in the history of the world have had that opportunity. If you really think about it. I think we were talking. I was talking to them through the lens of why my faith compelled me to go and be a classroom teacher. And it led to some really deep conversations about how people saw the application of their faith, the real orthopraxis of how they were going to live out their beliefs after college. And I just got to learn a lot about what folks cared about and what was on their minds. And I remember saying to one of my friends, and this is around the time when I was really interrogating my own politics and saying, I think that the values that come from my faith, they are pushing me to really realign my own political commitments. And I was talking to some friends who were in leadership of the Young Democrats for America, and just started talking about some of these trends that I was seeing. And that led to a conversation with the president of the Young Democrats of America at the time, a guy named Rod Snyder, who's a close friend of mine now. And I sit down with Rod, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. And the first thing he says is, I'm an evangelical Christian. I went to Eastern University, and I've been wanting to start a faith-based initiative for the Young Democrats since I got elected. So that's really that was my entry point into politics, was right there at that coffee shop in DC, where we had that conversation while I was in grad school. And so basically from there, I helped him kind of launch this initiative, and we partnered with the DNC to do it. And then I ended up writing my master's thesis all about the openings that I thought the Democratic Party had with young evangelicals and Catholics. And so I did a lot of research on it, interviewed a lot of folks, Robert Putnam and a whole host of others, who were just very knowledgeable about trends at the time. And that basically led into my first paid job in politics, which was to go on. So after I finished grad school, it was like right around the time of the 2012 election. And I went and was the deputy director of faith outreach at the Democratic National Committee, working alongside Reverend Derek Harkins, who was our national director of faith outreach. And so we worked together there, worked on a whole bunch of different kind of stakeholder engagement, worked through convention. We were working on the DNC side. And then after convention, we all got sent out to different states. So for the last 2 months, I was in Ohio doing faith outreach and connected in with a couple folks who went on to be senior leaders for the Biden campaign. And also through my work with Young Democrats, I worked with another person, John McCarthy, who ended up leading outreach for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, and who has served as our deputy national political director on the Biden campaign. So, met some folks early on in my career who were also deeply invested in this work, who would all have some hand in it in some way, shape, or form in the years to come, and who all kind of played key roles in the Biden campaign, with Greg leading being the campaign manager through the primary and continuing to serve as a senior advisor, with Ashley going on as the national coalitions director, and with John being the deputy national political director. So, for me, a lot of it was kind of building trust with folks. And I worked with all of them in different capacities over time as well. But after that, after the 2012 campaign, I went and worked in the Obama administration for a little bit, and then went back to nonprofit. But kind of really stayed involved with DNC faith engagement and with faith engagement in other efforts. Some different work with Union Theological Seminary, which you were part of, Doug, the Union of Affirming Christians, and otherwise. And I think was just seeing this moment open up, especially after 16, where it was going to be critically important for the candidate in 2020 to have a very expansive and robust faith engagement effort, because not only was there such a strong contrast in values, but in order to close off the path to victory for Donald Trump, I mean, the margins with key faith-motivated constituencies would be critical, because he was relying on those constituencies. He had to have his same margins from 2016 to be able to have a path to victory in 2020. And so just kind of knowing that, I stayed really close to the action, what was happening. I was an early Biden supporter, and started doing volunteer work with the campaign before there was a campaign.
I want to say something about that, because a lot of people the perception is, and sometimes people just flat out say this, that politics is rigged, everything is settled. There's this impression that there's a back room somewhere where people are making decisions about who's going to be the candidates. And my experience inside of the campaigns over the last number of years, and especially during the primary, is that's the furthest thing from the truth. There were days where I was like, I wish there was a power broker room somewhere where people just made all these decisions. These decisions about who's going to be the candidate and how a campaign is put together, man, it felt at times more like, especially during the primaries, when there were 20 different candidates who were running, and we were running seminars and trying to have interviews and conversations with them. It felt more like a neighborhood garage sale than it did like some, full on political power structure. It's really
Yep.
remarkable, isn't it? How straightforward and citizen led, even something as significant as a presidential campaign can be. Like, you're naming all these names and people thinking, well, these are just like power brokers of the new political, royalty. But they're not, right? They're all people that were doing other jobs before they
Yeah,
came on to do
for
this, and they
sure.
were
Yeah.
volunteering and they were kind of hoping.
Yep.
It's really remarkable when you think that this is how we choose our presidents and vice presidents and even senators and congress people. It's people raising their hand and saying, I'll help. What can I
Yeah.
do? How can I be engaged? I mean, am I underplaying that? Did I miss something? Or I mean, is it really as just as citizen
No, I mean,
engaged and led
it's
as I
amazing how
come to
much
believe?
it is like when we talk about building this broad, robust, diverse, inclusive coalition. It's amazing how like that just underplays how broad, robust, and diverse and important everybody is.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I just cannot overstate that enough. Is we won this election because of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who spoke up,
Hmm.
people who did things, people who came together and
Yeah.
made calls, people who hosted events, people who posted stuff on their Facebook wall that made three people, reconsider who they were going to vote for. Every little bit matters,
Yeah.
and I think when you look at the results, and you look at them across the board, and then you look at them state by state, you see how much things matter. You see how much these flips matter. You see
Yep.
how, as Trump is trying to dig into the margins of our key constituencies, why it's so important that we carved out margins amongst his key constituencies, especially in some of those critical states
Yeah.
in the Midwest, Georgia and Arizona. And so, I think our work was really focused. And the second part of your question was, um, around what we were doing, and
Hmm.
the broad coalition we built. It was really trying to say, we want to reflect the values of our candidates. And at first, it was just one candidate because we didn't have running mate yet. But then once Senator Harris was announced, it was just so clear what our mandate was, and it was to really ensure that folks didn't just have an invitation to the event, but a real seat at the table. And so we worked with, I mean, just a tremendous number of allied groups.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we had, of course, like Catholics for Biden, and then we had we actually had paid staff who were doing Jewish Americans for Biden,
Hmm.
Muslim Americans for Biden, African American faith engagement for Biden. And then we also had like our Latino believers cohort,
Hmm.
Clan Pascal and Biden. We had AAPI Christians for Biden. We had progressive believers for Biden, women believers for Biden, young believers for Biden.
There
We
was
worked with
believers for
humanists.
Biden everywhere
Yeah,
everywhere
I
you
mean,
could
we
look.
worked with humanists for Biden. We
Yeah.
worked with so many different groups, and many more that I didn't mention, but so many different groups.
Yeah.
And anytime folks wanted to get something going, whether if it was a friend reaching out saying, "Hey, let's move on LGBTQ believers for Biden," it was let's do it, you
Hmm.
know, and let's make it happen. And it was very much powered by our by the grassroots, by people who said, hey, like, I think this is important, I'm willing to lead it. Latter Day Saints for Biden. Just so many different religions represented, so many different people stepping up and stepping in and saying, I am willing to do this because I know that it matters to my community. I know it's so important.
Yeah. And look, that was unique. I mean, I know every presidential campaign has had some level of this, right? But this was next level of engagement, and at least from my experience, and then seeing how it ricocheted through the political system, that faith voters and that American citizens who saw themselves through the lens of their faith, that was taken seriously by this campaign. So obviously that came from Joe Biden, and he wanted that, and his team wanted that. Not every political candidate wants that, both on the Republican side and certainly on the Democratic side. They don't always feel as comfortable sort of putting assets and resources and organizational thrust behind thinking about voters through the lens of the voters' faith first. People wonder about this, and Josh, I didn't tell you we were going to talk about this, so this may be fresh conversation for you. But people say to me quite often, and they're a little careful, because if they know what I do, then they're being like, yeah, I know you want to get religious people to vote for the common good and elect some candidates and not other ones, because but they'll say things like, shouldn't we be really worried about that? Like, isn't that the problem that we organize around religion, and shouldn't we be separating our religion from our politics? And isn't this just more of the bifurcation and more of the separation in the country? Like, why do we have to do this in this way? Do you have any thoughts for people who are thinking about that, or have friends or family who are asking them about that? Like how come we can't just have people vote on policies and on the person? Why do we have to target these voters and put these kinds of parameters around their faith and targeting them as faith voters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great question, Doug. And I've heard that as long as I've been working in this space. And I think that from my vantage point, the key thing with politics, with organizing, with advocacy, is meeting people where they're at, and knowing that everyone has values, right? Every single person has some set of values that they live by, that they operate by, that are important to them. And for a lot of people in this country, those values come from their faith. Not everyone, for sure. About 3/4 of Americans identify with a particular faith. There's a rising share of folks who don't identify with any faith. But for everyone, your values come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to be doing real meaningful community building work, you got to meet people where they're at. And it starts by listening. It starts by seeking to understand. And I think it starts by authentically working to give people a space to be who they are, without trying to manipulate them or pander to them because of a particular element of their background. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about how Joe Biden operates. Is he is head to toe just a tremendously empathetic person, and he's someone who was at mass every Sunday, if not more, because that's who he is. And you see it in the pool reports. You see it in folks will sometimes comment on it. He just does it because it's who he is. He's not saying, hey everyone, look, I went to church. Like, Joe Biden is a man of faith. He's authentically a man of faith.
And like Joe Biden goes to church is not a news story, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he knows that for many people, that's a really, really important thing for them. He also, has respect for people, for whom their values, aren't coming from a faith tradition. And I think that's something that really stands out about who he is, and really appeals to people. And one of the reasons why they found him authentic and trustworthy, and elected him president. And I think that there's sometimes people conflate faith engagement on campaigns, or even faith engagement in government, with church-state things. Like the First Amendment really, really talks about, there are two key components to it. There's the Establishment Clause, which says that the state shall not establish a religion. And then there is a clause basically giving people freedom to practice their own religion. Meeting people where they're at doesn't violate either of those. It's not establishing any state religion, and it's not infringing upon anyone else's religion. It's just saying, hey, we recognize that this is an important part of people's lives. We're going to connect around shared values, and then figure out if we can work together on key things that matter to all of us. Which I think, is very much community organizing 101 too. Mm-hmm. It's really thinking about, like, hey, in spite of differences that we all have, everyone has differences, right? How can we come together based off of things that we are both passionate about, and things that, we both have a shared connection around, that we have common ground around, whether that's, fighting for immigration reform, or education equity, or healthcare for everyone, or humane treatment of people because of their religion. We've seen things from the Trump administration that have very much violated the First Amendment.
Right.
But we um, just working on engaging people and meeting them where they're at doesn't do that in the least bit.
Mm-hmm.
It really, I think, lives up to those American principles, of seeing everyone for who they are and upholding the inherent human dignity of everyone.
Josh, having to do this in the middle of a pandemic and like where people can't travel and you couldn't get together and it was endless Zoom meetings. I don't know if Zoom like keeps a running clock of the number of Zoom meetings a person has been in. That data probably exists somewhere, but I'd like to see your numbers on that. Like you had to move from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and coordinate with all these people from different faith traditions. And I was on a lot of these phone calls and they're Google Hangout calls or Zoom calls, and half the people are on just their phone and they're on mute some of the time. Like it's everything you could imagine. And you're having to do this across the board day after day. How do you keep a movement of like faith inspired voters from all these different traditions, many of them which you mentioned? How do you keep all that like going while you're having to never have an in-person meeting? And I don't know, there's probably a lot of these people that are on these calls with you that you still haven't met face to face.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It'll be
um,
how do you do that and build enough trust across the system of politics and religion for people to to feel like, yeah, I can really lean in on this.
I think a lot of a really important part to our work on the campaign was keeping it relationship based and trying to never have it be transactional. Really ensuring that we're having like one-on-one conversations with people and working with people to get to know them, right? And when they reach out, like responding and just really trying to ensure that we're staying human amidst all this
Hmm.
and not losing that connection, even though it's tougher with our
Hmm.
limitations right now due to the pandemic. And I think keeping that at the forefront is really, really something that I think it's easy to get lost, especially as you get really, really tired and you're just looking to get things done, but picking up the phone and calling people, getting to know people, spending the time to build those relationships, I think is really something that was a
Hmm.
huge wind at our backs, and really helped us early on, establish what we were about. Because our campaign, we had 3 anchoring priorities for faith engagement in this campaign, and they're priorities, that just very much align with who our candidates are. One, people of faith need to feel valued and respected by this campaign.
Hmm.
It's very, very important. Too often, people of faith are neglected or taken for granted,
Mm-hmm.
depending on which faith background they come from, where the election's happening, all these different things, right? We wanted to make sure people of faith knew they were valued and respected by our candidates because they are. And so it was up to us and our team to really ensure that that was known, that was felt, experienced.
Yeah, can I just say, I
Two,
know you're going to get to
yeah,
number 2 and 3, but I just want to pause there for a second because that last little kind of side comment there, because they are valued by the candidates, by Senator Harris and Vice President Biden, like that's an important part of it, right? It wasn't that, hey, again, every campaign is going to say we want every vote, we want faith voters, of
yeah,
course we do. Like
yep,
no one's going to be like faith voters stay away. But sometimes there's indifference or even
mm-hmm,
hostility to faith voters, or just sort of a lack of understanding that
yeah,
faith kind of motivates people.
yep,
This idea that the candidates and the campaign itself really did see all Americans, including people of faith, uh, that has to be mentioned is a part of the political faith struggle inside of democratic politics, to be blunt. That sometimes people of faith feel like they need to keep their faith quiet if they're going to
mm-hmm,
engage in the democratic political system. I mean, I've experienced that in Minnesota. I
yeah,
know a lot of people have experienced that, where candidates will say. In fact, we even had a candidate at one of the events when we were trying to get people to vote for Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump this year, and somebody running for office She's running for a federal seat. She's currently a state was a state rep, and she said, "Hey, this is really fun for me to be an event because our events were called, the theme was faith, hope, and love for a change on election day." And she
Yeah.
says, "It's really great to be at like a faith, hope, and love rally like this. Normally, with these things, you introduce your background to tell people, and I get to tell you something here that I don't have in my normal stump speech, and that was that growing up, my mom was a pastor, so I grew up
Mm-hmm.
as a pastor's kid." And I thought, why do you not tell people that? Like, why would you, why would you hold that back? And then a little while later, and she went on to say, when I go door knocking, I get to some doors and they open it and they say, well, I'm a Christian and that means I vote for Republicans. She said, I just don't understand why people think that. And I thought maybe it's because candidates even feel nervous about mentioning their background and where they come from. Right, because there's something, and then Republicans, on the other hand, like, I don't know, they baptize everything in the terms of like the most unreligious president in the history of American, democracy. I would put Donald Trump in that category. Acts as if he's, the pastor in chief. Trying to figure out how to hold the Bible, which is a whole other thing. But Republicans have this way of just like baptizing everything. But there's some kind of a nervousness inside of Democratic politics about faith. So to hear you say, no, because we as a campaign needed the campaign to recognize and value faith voters, because the candidates do. And it's our job to not manufacture a story about these candidates. I'm putting words in your mouth, so you can correct me if this is wrong, but it's your job not to put words in the candidate's mouth. It's your job for the campaign to reflect the reality of the candidate.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that you saw that in this campaign. You saw that at convention. You saw that in commercials. We put out a 7-figure ad buy on Catholic and evangelical TV and radio in key battleground states. I don't think that has been done before, to my knowledge, at that level. You saw, Joe Biden talking about his own faith numerous times. Senator Harris as well, and both of them doing faith events, and so doing faith videos regularly. And so, I think that, again, it very much is a testament to who they are, and their appreciation for the contributions of people of faith, not only now, when we know that so many faith communities are shouldering tremendous additional burdens that are brought on by the impacts of the pandemic in their communities. But you see from our candidates a real appreciation and recognition of the contributions of people of faith in justice movements throughout the history of our country.
Right.
And and sometimes you had folks on the other side too, unfortunately, using faith as a cudgel. But that doesn't mean that the folks who were using it to bend the moral arc of the universe in the direction of justice, was any less potent.
Right.
I think for our candidates, it is just so important, to ensure that we were living up to who they are. And the other two priorities, real quick, that I'll mention that I think are important for people to know, is priority 2 was we were directly asking people of faith for their votes, and saying, we are asking for your support. We want your support, and we are working to earn your support. Not only do we value you, but we are asking for your support, because again, we don't take you for granted, and we aren't neglecting you. And then the third big thing was we were making the case for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as opposed to just against Donald Trump. And I think, we talked so much about the values contrast in this election, but really about how the Biden-Harris agenda was much more aligned to the common good values of people of faith than what we saw from the current administration. I mean, so many times over, right? I mean, if you go and you look at what Jesus preaches to do and not to do, I mean, really, like, you see the contrast, right? Like, you literally saw the contrast in the tickets. On that,
incredible,
in so many ways. And so, for us, it was really getting out there and hammering home that message and making sure that people saw who our candidates were, and what they were going to fight for, what they have fought for, but really what they're going to fight for in terms of moving our country away from divisiveness, fear, and hatred, and more towards, justice, unity, and the common good.
And I guess you trust that, and having only worked on the campaign side, it's not yet the administration, so you don't know. But I get you trust that those will become the priorities of the Biden administration when it takes office at noon on January 20th as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like we were talking before about how people's values, come from different places, and really everyone's got a set of values, and their values
Yeah.
really, you can see who they are by their values, right? We talk about by their fruit you will know them, right? When it comes to, for us as Christians, we say that. I think when you look at the values when you look at fundamentally who Joe Biden is and who Kamala Harris is, you see folks who fight for things that align with the things they talk about in the campaign. They weren't just pandering. They weren't just making stuff up. You saw they're people who connect with folks. They're people who, I've been on multiple calls with both of them, and just seeing the way in which they relate with people and engage with people. It's real, and we've all heard it. We all heard about someone who was in a line, and Joe Biden heard a story about like a family member, and was like, "I'm going to call him right now."
Right.
I mean, I can't even count how many times I've heard different stories, right?
Versions of that same thing.
Versions of that story, and I just think that that's who they are. That's how they're going to lead. And I think it's going to be really, really important for us as a country to find places where we can all work together moving forward, and where we can find that common ground, because we're going to need it. And we have so many challenges right now, and it's time to move forward and time to actively work on the healing process that we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, and look, I mean, religion has been used for all kinds of goodness in the world, and it should be. And it's also used in politics to separate people and to harm people. And that work is happening already. There were lots of pushes against the Biden-Harris ticket, and this just ratcheted up, at least in what I see. And I think it's going to be important that that the faith community continues to take their civic engagement seriously. And part of your civic engagement is how you engage in electoral politics. But it's so much more than that, right? And look, so I want to, we haven't really done a firm, cheers and congratulations yet, but to all three of those points you made, congratulations, because you accomplished that. I think those things took place, right? I do think people of faith felt respected. They were asked for the vote. They did turn out and say yes to Joe Biden in at least the constituency I've paid a lot of attention to, which are white evangelicals, which the reason I talk a lot about them is not only it's the group that I come from, so I know it well and feel an obligation to push that community into the common good. But there's just so many of them. Like there are so many evangelicals, right? I don't know, 70 million or 100 million voters, and 24% is the number that I'm using right now, because that's what I saw in one of these recent polls. 24% white evangelical support for Joe Biden. That's the highest since I think 1976. I'm willing to be corrected on that if you know another.
I think 08 was right around there as well.
I think it was 23. So I think it was the highest. I think it was the highest ever. At least those are the numbers that I've been using for a number of years. That and we were saying things like, look, if you could get anywhere close to getting into the Barack Obama level of support in 08. If you could get into 23% of white evangelicals, to be at 24%, a quarter of white evangelical voters saying yes to Joe Biden and not yes to Donald Trump. Now I know that's 75%, right? People will say, well, there's still, there's still a lot of work to do. But hey, here's what I'm telling you. There's a lot of work to do, which means there's a lot of possibility in front of Democratic candidates. It means there's still an awful lot of people who can be asked, who can be respected, whose votes can be asked for, and who can be participants in their civic duty in thinking about Democrats. And boy, I sure hope that this is less like 2008, where after that high point, the evangelical support was in a decline. I hope it stayed. I hope this is a starting line, and that something happens in culture and society. And it's not up to the administration alone to do this. It's up to a lot of other people and advocates and groups and people that need to be about their business and get busy working. But this idea that that political parties are split so evenly by the issue of their religion is a real problem. And I think you had a lot to do with that, Josh. So congratulations. I think it's just really, really
Team effort
super,
all the way, my
super work.
friend. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, credit goes all around. You had a lot to do with that. Tremendous amount to do with that. And Vote Common Good, and all the Vote Common Good supporters, as well as so many of the other allied groups that I mentioned. In particular for the evangelical community as well. There was an Evangelicals for Biden group that really did a tremendous amount of work, especially
there were pro-life evangelicals for
pro-life
Biden.
evangelicals for Biden, right? I mean,
as religious people do, they will slice that prosciutto as thin as possible, right?
Yep. And I think that the thing is, it's like every person who goes and tells their story, and everyone who reads that story, it has an impact. And the more that we can have folks just consider different perspectives, the better. And I think that there was no political party prescription in the New Testament or the Old Testament, right? It was values. It was, here are the core principles that we are called to live by, and how do we take those and have fidelity to those first and foremost, and then apply those to our engagement in the world around us, which includes, but is not exclusive to, our politics. But the way in which we apply it to our politics really matters. And I think that we've seen a lot of different things happening right now that I think give me hope in terms of how people have been responding. I think in particular around the issue of racial justice, and how people responded to the murder of George Floyd in your backyard in Minneapolis. And I know you were out there, day one, marching and protesting, and to see how many other people ended up, coming out and for the first time joining a march or a protest.
Totally.
And really speaking up, and the fact that we had so many different leaders speak up. We had so many folks preaching about this who you wouldn't have necessarily assumed would be doing that, and who've shied away from that, some of them in the past. I think that it shows that we are in a moment of possibility. And if that possibility is moving a small percentage, then you know what? That's a small percentage that may not have been moved otherwise. And I think that it's so important for us, to keep pushing people in through our witness and how we respond to these moments. And this is, you've been, just amazing at this, Doug, in terms of your own walk. I think we all need to be doing that as much as we can, and calling people in to be a part of justice work that really upholds that idea of Imago Dei, that I think we're called to, that like echoes throughout the ministry of Jesus, that echoes throughout, the prophets, and throughout the epistles. And I think that across the board, we have a chance now to keep that momentum moving forward in terms of, how we can bring people together as opposed to divide people and tear them apart, even in the midst of efforts to do the opposite. So I think that that's going to be the important thing for all of us moving forward.
Yeah, look, and 78 plus million people taking the effort to vote for Joe Biden's significant, right? That's a great success. And frankly, awfully startling that 72 million people still said, give us another round of Donald Trump. Like that people, chose to refresh that car lease for another 4 years is unbelievable to me. And it just tells me that, man, there are systemic structural issues in this society that I cannot believe that people actually looked at Donald Trump's performance as president and said to themselves, oh, I think he's doing a really great job. Like there are other things that have kept them rooted into supporting a candidate, even one that is as hurtful, harmful, cruel, incompetent, and I could just go on describing Donald Trump's failures. So there's something that's alive in our politics that, a day when I want to just celebrate that, some good things happened and this guy's going to go and we're finally going to be done with him as, the damage that he can inflict as the president. boy, there's still some things that are like, okay, there is a lot. This thing shouldn't have been close. And I'll tell you, I mean, I ended up. Can I ask you what you did on election night? Are you open to describing that? I'll describe what I was doing. We were in Washington
Yeah, of
D.C.,
course.
right down the street from Lafayette Park. We're planning to be at the end of Black Lives Matter Plaza and to celebrate there. I was highly convinced that Joe Biden was going to win the state of Florida, and I thought they'd call it by about 8:40, 8:30 or so Eastern time. And we were down there, and at whatever 8:40 when they called the state for Donald Trump. I mean, my head started to spin. There was one point we had a German film crew following us because they're doing a documentary about religious leaders in America.
Yeah.
And at one point, my adult son Taylor was with me, and we stop into a McDonald's right there by Lafayette Park, and it's like abandoned, or quiet. And I'm leaned up against a white wall, and my head is slumped. And Taylor comes up and goes, "Dad, the film guy is here. You got to pep up a little bit." Like, I was like, "Oh, I can barely think straight." I was having this feeling like it's happening again. I told myself I wasn't going to let my expectations build. I'm apparently a liar to myself because I did just let them build right up. And man, it was a difficult night. And I started feeling a little better by 3 o'clock in the morning. And by, 8:30 or 9 the next morning, I felt like, okay, this has been solved. But it was not as dramatic as, early 2009 or November 9th of 2016. But man, it was a tough experience, and it kind of made me say, okay, there wasn't a blue wave. I think there was a blue rising of the tide because Joe Biden got more votes in every single state, maybe other than Mississippi, than happened in 2016. So everywhere people said no to Donald Trump and yes to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Great news.
Yeah.
But boy, I thought it was going to be much higher. How did you spend the night election night? Are you comfortable sharing that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was great to see you on election morning over at Esperanza in Philadelphia.
Yeah, we were in Philadelphia that morning, and then in Philadelphia, and then that night, outside the White House.
Yeah, and y'all headed up to DC. We did. We spent the day canvassing and working on just kind of keeping an eye on different like what was happening at different polling locations, seeing if folks needed like water and stuff like that. And then we, a number of colleagues and I went and we were all hanging out, watching the results together, socially distant. And fortunately we knew that there were going to be waves because of the mail-in ballots. And we knew that would probably impact things. I think, you're watching and you're like, well, I wish that we would have won Florida. I wish that we would have won Ohio, and those, I wish we would have won Texas. And those were all.
But you didn't freak out at 8:30, 8:40? You weren't standing against a white wall?
We had a couple team calls, where folks just kind of ran through things.
I'm so glad.
And kind of gave us, like, hey, like, we're good. We expected what we're seeing. And I think that was really helpful. I think when I knew we had it was, I was pretty sure we had it when they called Arizona, when Fox News called Arizona. I was like, okay, this is good. This is a good sign. And then we knew that we had it when they called Nebraska 2.
Oh, yeah.
When they called Nebraska 2, it was like, hey, we're going to win the election. Because, we were really confident about just like where the additional votes were being counted from in Wisconsin and Michigan. Obviously, all legally cast votes that just takes a lot of time to count because of the pandemic and because.
So you knew that with Wisconsin and Michigan settled, then the second district of Nebraska and Arizona was enough to get you to 270.
We were pretty confident in Wisconsin and Michigan. That said, Wisconsin was very close. I wasn't expecting it to be so close, but it was really, really close. And clearly, like, everything that the campaign did there, and that, y'all did there and that so many outside groups did there mattered. Every little thing mattered there. 21,000 votes is not a lot of votes. So everything there mattered. But I remember, so I went back I was staying with a friend, and I went back there probably around 2 or 2:30 in the morning. And I, was just kind of feeling a little bit of an inclination to really meditate on Psalm 30, verse 5. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. And I was getting ready for bed, and I was like, oh, I'm going to check the results again one last time and just kind of like see like if the counts have changed at all and everything, because a lot of this relied on the counts, as the Michigan and Wisconsin numbers, as we got more information there on, stuff going our way. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go to sleep for like a few hours. And I was like, going to look at my phone again. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to trust. I'm going to hold on to that scripture. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to go and get a little bit of sleep. And when I woke up, more numbers had come in, and we were ahead in Wisconsin. And with Michigan, based off the votes they were counting, we knew that once we went ahead, we were just like, so many of our folks voted early, right? And because of these different state laws, it created in all these states this red mirage, right? That because they were counting day of votes first, that it looked like this big advantage, but there were so many votes that had come in via mail legally earlier. And so, once we saw that we went ahead in Michigan, it was over.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to some different friends, and folks were reaching out and be like, how do you feel? And I'm like, we won.
Yeah.
And it didn't make it any less emotional when they called it on Saturday, though. Like, I kind of thought that maybe it would, because you sort of knew it was going to happen for these several days. You're like, there could be something that comes up, but I feel pretty good. But when they called it Saturday morning, it was like, wow, like this is real. We did this.
I still feel like I'm going to feel that again 2 different times. The other day I was nerding out and looking at like, when does each state certify their votes, and by what date do they have to? It's like November 20th, November 23rd, November 30th, December 1st, December 12th, like this rolling set of dates. And then once those electors vote, I think it's December 14th, then I'll feel a little better. And then somehow on, I don't know, January 5th or 6th, whenever Congress certifies those, I'll feel, and then, right about noon on the 20th of January. Like, I'm not, like, I have waves of emotion ready to come with this thing. And, I want to see that helicopter either fly away, or no need for the helicopter to fly away because he's slunked away in the night and he's down in Florida watching all this stuff on television, because, it's going to be the end of a real national nightmare. And not to borrow a phrase, but it's morning in America. And I think there's a new start to something that I really hope captures people's attention. And in some ways, I think a closer election can serve a lot of the purposes that some of us really care about, which is getting through the partisanship and into a collective experience of America again. I think it can be better than because what we would have said had it been another 2 million people or something, spread out around the country, that it was a landslide. And even though it would be a fraction of the total population in America, just enough would have made it seem as if some people won and other people now can be ignored. And there's something about it being close that just reminds us how big of a country this is, how many people are now part of the voting engagement anyway, how much politics impacts everyone. And we really have to have an all-in kind of attitude about our civic engagement in this country. And that has been rended by this president, by the Trump administration, and just harmed. And I think it's really going to take a lot to bring that healing back. So.
Yep, no question, my friend. And I do need to run. I've got to jump on another call. But
see, that makes me feel better. At least you're still having to jump onto other calls.
Yeah, I do.
At least you're still up for it. Josh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Vote Common Good, and for all that y'all did and continue to do. Look forward to keep working together. And we have a lot of work to do. So
Right on.
Let's keep
We'll see you
bending
down the
more
road.
The universe in the right direction.
Okay, buddy. Thanks.
Thanks,
Josh
Doug.
Dickson. Josh Dickson, National Faith Director for the Biden campaign. Thanks all for sticking around, for being a part of this. Tried to put this onto Instagram like I promised, and apparently the Instagram audio didn't work. So maybe someone could, dub it over and post it on there. Hey, I'm Doug Pagitt from Vote Common Good. Thanks everybody for all the goodness you've been a part of for all this, for this past year. If you've been a part of the Vote Common Good community, thanks. If you're new to the Vote Common Good community, get signed up. We'd love to have you in. We're going to be quiet for a couple of weeks here. The whole organization needs to take a bit of a rest and a bit of a break, and come back strong in December and January. So thanks for everybody for being a part of this and for following us here on the stream today. See you.